My name is Julian Christopher, and I'm 38 years old. Just a few hours before I inherited $33 million from my father, I was rushing home to tell my wife. But then a car slammed into me, and I woke up alone in a hospital bed. When I managed to reach my wife, Anna, she didn't sound worried at all. If anything, she seemed irritated, demanding to know where I'd disappeared to. She said she didn't have time to talk because she was at work, then hung up on me. Exactly 3 days later, she walked into my room wearing a stunning, expensive suit. She took my hand gently and told me we needed to separate. I found someone else, she said. And right then, that someone else stepped into the room. The man who had come to finish me off. He was a lawyer. The very same lawyer who had helped me secure my $33 million inheritance. Before I continue the story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And if you have ever been betrayed by the person who was supposed to love you most, hit that like button and subscribe because you will not believe what happened next. The first thing I remember after the crash was the sound. A slow, steady beep cutting through a thick, black fog. For a few seconds I didn't know if I was dead, and that was my punishment, some endless mechanical metronome marking time I no longer had. Then the pain arrived, sharp and real, crawling up my ribs and into my skull. Dead people probably don't hurt this much, I thought. So I must still be here. I forced my eyes open. The ceiling above me was that particular shade of off-white you only ever see in hospitals. The fluorescent lights buzzed quietly. The air felt too cold and too clean. I tried to move and a bolt of fire shot through my side. Someone had taken a baseball bat to my ribs and then thoughtfully parked a truck on top of them. I let out a sound that was somewhere between a groan and a curse. A shadow moved on my left. "Easy, Mr. Christopher. Don't try to sit up yet." The voice belonged to a woman in blue scrubs, older, calm, with a badge that said Rita, RN. She adjusted something on the four-pole and glanced at the monitor above my head. "You've been through a lot." "Where?" My throat felt like it had been sandblasted. "Memorial General," she said. "You're in Atlanta. Do you remember what happened?" I closed my eyes for a moment and let the memories crawl back. Headlights in the rearview mirror. Wet asphalt. The slam of metal and glass. The sickening moment when the car stopped being a solid object and turned into paper around me. And before that, just a few hours before that, my father's lawyer sliding a folder across his mahogany desk and saying the number out loud. 33 million. Car accident, I managed. On I-85. That's right. She gave a small approving nod. You're lucky to be alive. Couple of broken ribs, concussion, some bruising. No internal bleeding. The doctors are calling it a miracle. Lucky. That was one word for it. I worked some spit into my mouth. How long have I been here? 2 days, she said gently. You were in and out. The concussion knocked you around a bit. But you're doing better now. 2 days. My first thought wasn't about my injuries. It wasn't about my car, or the police, or insurance. It was about Anna. My wife, I said, my voice cracking. Anna Christopher. Is she here? Has she been here? Something flickered across Rita's face. It was quick, but I caught it. A tiny tightening around the eyes, a slight pull at the corner of her mouth. I'd seen that look before on nurses at my father's bedside. Pity. We called the number listed as your emergency contact, she said carefully. More than once. No one has come by yet. But people get scared of hospitals. Maybe she's just waiting until you're more awake. It was a reasonable explanation. It just didn't feel true. Anna hated hospitals. That was true. But she hated being out of control even more. The idea that I'd been lying here for 2 days and she hadn't marched in demanding to see a doctor, something was off. I need my phone, I said. Please. They brought your things up from the ER, Rita said. She went to a small plastic drawer and pulled out a clear bag with my watch, wallet, and phone inside. The phone looked like it had lost the fight with the windshield. The screen was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, but when she held the power button, it glowed to life. Battery's low, but it works, she said, laying it gently in my hand. Don't talk too long. The doctor will be in soon. When she left, the silence in the room expanded. The beeping, the hiss of the oxygen, my own breathing, ragged and shallow. I unlocked the phone with my thumb. 23 missed calls. All from unknown numbers. The hospital, probably. None from Anna. I pushed that detail aside and hit her name. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. On the 4th ring, she picked up. Julian. No hello. No, oh my God, are you okay? Just my name, sharp and suspicious. The background noise hit me next, clinking cups, a milk steamer, that low hum of people talking. She was in a cafe. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile she couldn't see, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "Yeah, it's me." "Where the hell are you?" she snapped. "You disappear for 2 days, you don't answer your phone, and now you call me from some random number?" I blinked at the ceiling. Of all the reactions I'd imagined, anger wasn't on the list. And I was in an accident. A car hit me. I swallowed. "I'm in the hospital." There was a short pause. If this were a movie, this is where the music would swell and her voice would break with worry. Real life is quieter. "What hospital?" she asked flatly. "Memorial General." I waited. "They said they called you." "Yeah, I saw some missed calls from a number I didn't recognize," she said. "I was in meetings. I can't just pick up random calls all day, Julian. Some of us actually work." The words landed harder than the truck. I stared at the phone, then put it back to my ear. "I almost died," I said before I could stop myself. It slipped out, raw and small. "Well, you didn't," she replied. "So that's good. Look, I'm in the middle of closing a deal. We've got a client flying in from Chicago. I'm literally in line for coffee with my boss. I can't just drop everything." I heard her step aside, the cafe noise fading slightly. "How long are you going to be there?" "A few days," they said. "Maybe more. I don't know." "Okay," she said briskly, like we were discussing a dentist appointment. "Then you're in good hands. You know how you get when you're stressed. Just focus on recovering. I'll try to come by when I can." "When you can," I repeated. "Anna, it's me. I know who it is, Julian. And I know how dramatic you get." There it was. The word she liked to use when I was upset about something she didn't want to deal with. Dramatic. "I have targets to hit," she continued. "My promotion is on the line. If I walk out in the middle of a client lunch, no one's going to care that my husband has a couple bruises. They're going to care that I wasn't in the room." "It's more than bruises," I said quietly. "They said it was a miracle I survived." "You're talking," she said. "So the miracle worked. Look, I'll call you later, okay? Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Anna." Wait. But I was talking to a dead line. She'd already hung up. I kept the phone to my ear for a few seconds longer, listening to the hollow silence. Then I put it down on the sheets. The heart monitor next to me ticked up a few beats. I forced myself to breathe slowly until it settled again. I'd been with Anna for 8 years, married for 5. I knew she could be cold. I knew she could be calculating. That was part of what made her good at her job. But there was a time when she would have dropped anything for me. A flat tire. A flu. A bad day. Somewhere along the way, we'd swapped places. Her career had become the patient on life support, and I was just the guy who made sure the machine stayed plugged in. "Everything okay?" Rita's voice floated in from the doorway. She'd come back in to check the 4 and must have seen whatever was on my face. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, surprised to find them wet. "Yeah, I lied. She's just busy." Rita gave a small, sad smile. "They're always busy until they're not," she said. "Painkillers are due in 10. Try to rest." She dimmed the lights slightly and slipped out. Busy. That's what Anna always was. Busy closing deals. Busy networking. Busy fixing the life she thought she deserved instead of the one she had. I stared at the dark rectangle of my phone, and, inevitably, my mind went back to the office where this whole nightmare had started. My father's lawyer, Daniel Krell, had an office that looked exactly like you'd imagine for a man who made his living off generational money. Thick carpets, walls of books no one had opened in a decade, a view over Midtown that turned people into ants. I'd sat in the leather chair across from his desk, still smelling faintly of the hospice room I'd left that morning. My father's cologne seemed to hang around me like a ghost. Daniel folded his hands on the polished wood and said, "Julian, your father was a complicated man." That was one way to put it. My father, Victor Christopher, was the kind of man who turned everything into a project, including me. He'd built an industrial packaging company from nothing, then turned that into a portfolio of investments, then turned that into a one-man empire that took up more space in his head than his own family did. "He worked a lot," I said simply. Daniel gave that neutral lawyer's smile. "He trusted you more than you think," he replied. Then he slid the folder toward me. "As executor, I'm obligated to walk you through the numbers." I opened it and saw more zeros than I'd ever seen in one place in my life. 33 million, give or take, in liquid and near-liquid assets, Daniel said. "There are additional holdings in property and long-term investments, but this is the portion that is under your direct control as primary beneficiary." Primary. I repeated, my brain stuck in first gear. Yes, he said. Your father updated his will last year. You are sole heir. There are some small bequests to charity, but the estate goes to you. Anna, I'd said before I could stop myself. My wife. Your wife is not a named beneficiary, Daniel said. If that's what you're asking. She thought most of it would go to the foundation. I muttered. So did I. Daniel leaned back. Your father wanted you to have options he never did, he said. His exact words were, tell my son not to waste this on people who don't care if he lives or dies. At the time, I'd thought that was just my father being bitter. Lying in that hospital bed, realizing my wife had hung up on me like I was an interruption in her schedule, the words sounded a lot more like a warning. After Rita turned the lights down, the hours blurred. Nurses came and went. A doctor with kind eyes and tired shoulders shined a light in my pupils and asked me to follow his finger. I dozed. I woke to pain. I dozed again. Through all of it, my phone stayed stubbornly silent. No text from Anna. No, how are you holding up? No, sorry I was short. When can I visit? Nothing. On the evening of the second day, Rita came in with a tray of food that looked more like a science experiment than dinner. Good news, she said, setting it down. You're moving to a regular ward tomorrow. We're springing you from ICU. Great, I said, stabbing half-heartedly at the mashed potatoes. Any word from my wife? Rita's eyes softened. I'm sorry, honey. Not yet. I nodded and pushed the tray away. My ribs ached. My head throbbed dully. But it was my chest, somewhere deeper than bone, that hurt the most. That night, I stared out the narrow hospital window at the parking lot lights and told myself a story I didn't believe. She's scared, I thought. This is big. 33 million. It's a lot to process. She just needs time. She'll show up tomorrow with that tight little smile she uses when she's been wrong about something and doesn't want to admit it. We'll fight. Then we'll laugh. We'll figure it out. By the morning of the third day, I'd rehearsed that conversation 100 times in my head. I'd imagined her walking in with a cup of decent coffee, rolling her eyes at the hospital food. I'd imagined telling her about my father's estate properly, explaining the conditions, talking about what we could do with it, pay off the mortgage, start over somewhere, maybe even save our marriage. That fantasy lasted exactly until 10:14 a.m. That's when the door to my room opened and Anna finally walked in. Not with a hospital coffee cup, not in jeans, and a hoodie like she used to wear on lazy weekends. She walked in like a stranger. Tailored cream suit that probably cost more than my car. Nude heels. Hair slicked back in a severe twist. Designer tote on her shoulder. Expensive perfume cutting through the hospital smell. She paused just inside the doorway and gave me a smile that didn't touch her eyes. You look better than I expected, she said, as if I'd just come back from a long flight, not a near-fatal crash. I felt my throat tighten. Takes more than a truck to get rid of me. I tried to joke, but my voice cracked in the middle. Hi. She crossed the room and measured steps, and set her bag down on the visitor's chair. Then she took my hand, very carefully, like she was afraid I might stain her. The touch should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like being examined. We need to talk, Julian, she said. Her tone was soft, but distant, professional. The way she talked to clients when she was about to tell them they'd lost the deal. A cold little knot formed in my stomach. Whatever conversation I'd rehearsed in my head, this wasn't it. About the accident? I asked. About us, she said. And the way she said it, I knew that whatever had hit me on the highway was nothing compared to what was coming next. Anna didn't sit down right away. She stood beside my bed, still holding my hand as if she was deciding the right moment to let go. Her eyes didn't look sad. They looked resolved, like she had already lived through this moment hours ago and was now just acting out the script. When she finally released my hand, she smoothed her blazer sleeves and pulled in a breath that told me she wasn't here to comfort me. She was here to deliver something. Julian, these last few months have been difficult. For both of us. I watched her carefully. She wasn't talking about the accident. She wasn't even talking about us. She was warming up to something far more rehearsed. I know we haven't been at our best, she continued, and I've been thinking a lot about what we want. What I want. There was no tremor in her voice. No hesitation. This wasn't a woman struggling to let her husband down gently. This was someone who had already stepped into her next life and was now politely closing the door on the old one. Anna, I said, trying to sit up a little. My ribs fought back, and pain shot across my chest. Can we slow down? Just talk to me. You didn't visit. I was worried. I was busy, she said too quickly. Then she softened her tone, but not her expression. Work has been demanding. You know that. Demanding enough to skip the hospital for 3 days? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked past me, out the window, as if gathering herself. I didn't come here to argue, she said quietly. I came here because you deserve honesty. That word, honesty, twisted inside me. I braced myself without realizing it. There's someone else, she said. No build-up. No apology. Just a knife straight to the bone. I stared at her, trying to find some sign she was joking, or panicking, or confused. But her expression didn't waver. Her gaze didn't flicker. She had practiced this. Someone else. I repeated slowly. When? Anna, how long? A while, she said, her jaw tightening. And before you say anything, yes, I should have told you earlier. But things have been strained between us for a long time, Julian. You know that. You feel it. My pulse hammered in my ears. Part of me wanted to shout at her, demand answers, demand explanations, demand something. But the concussion made everything feel like it was underwater. My thoughts lagged. My emotions tripped over each other. Why are you telling me this now? I finally asked. Here? While I'm like this? Because I didn't want to wait, she said. Dragging this out will only make things worse. She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder. Legal documents. The sight of them made my stomach drop. I had these prepared, she said. They're just preliminary. Nothing final. Just an agreement for separation until we can sort out the divorce. I didn't want to blindside you later. She had already blindsided me, harder than the truck that smashed into me. Anna, what about the accident? I asked, my voice barely steady. Doesn't that matter? Doesn't almost losing me matter? She gave me a pained expression that wasn't pain at all. It was irritation dressed as sympathy. Julian, don't do that, she said. Don't turn this into guilt. I'm sorry you were hurt. I really am. But that doesn't change the reality. Reality. According to her, the reality was that my life had changed in a split second on that highway, and she was already moving on without looking back. She placed the folder on the table beside my bed. Neatly aligning it with the edge like this was just another transaction she needed to finalize before lunch. He'll be here in a minute, she said. He can explain everything. He. I repeated. Your lawyer? No, she said. My partner. Partner. The word punched harder than all the others. Anna, you brought him here? Now. He insisted. He wants things to be transparent. My heart pressed hard against my bruised ribs. Transparent? What did transparency have to do with walking into a hospital room where a man was still connected to machines because he survived what should have been a fatal crash? I didn't have time to ask. The door opened behind her. I turned my head, expecting some corporate guy in a suit and a fake comforting smile. But when the man stepped inside, everything inside me went cold. I knew that face. I knew it too well. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was my lawyer, Daniel Krell. The same man who had walked me through the inheritance documents. The same man who had congratulated me on becoming the sole beneficiary of a $33 million estate. The same man who had handled every piece of paperwork with a calmness that now looked sinister. He closed the door softly behind him, his eyes landing on me with a look that was too controlled, too measured, too familiar. Julian, he said, nodding once. Glad to see you awake. My hand went instinctively to the railing of the bed. My breath stalled somewhere in my throat. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just infidelity. Something far darker had been unfolding behind my back. Anna stepped closer to him, her hand brushing his arm with a familiarity that made bile rise in my throat. I've told him, she said. Good, Daniel replied, his gaze never leaving mine. Then we can move forward. Move forward? With what? Ending my marriage? Ending my life? The crash, the timing of it, the inheritance, his presence now. None of it lined up unless you twisted the pieces into a shape that suddenly made horrifying sense. Why are you here? I asked him quietly. What do you want? He smiled the polite lawyer's smile. He'd given me the day. He handed me the inheritance folder. To finish what we started, he said. My blood ran cold. I wasn't sure yet what he meant, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My accident was no accident. And the man standing in front of me wasn't finished with me at all. Daniel didn't move closer. He just stood at the foot of my bed with the confidence of a man who already knew the outcome of the conversation. The air in the room felt heavier, and for a moment the only sound was the steady beeping of the heart monitor betraying how fast my pulse had spiked. Anna shifted beside him, crossing her arms like she wanted to hurry this along. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't conflicted. She was eager to get to the next part of her new life, and I was simply an inconvenient leftover she needed to discard. "Let's be civilized about this," Daniel said, adjusting his cuffs like he was preparing for a meeting instead of a confrontation with the man he'd betrayed. "You and Anna have grown apart. Everyone can see that. She's ready to move on, and you deserve a clean separation." Clean separation. His lawyer tone made it sound like nothing more than dissolving a partnership, like I was some business venture that had run its course. "You two planned this," I said. It wasn't a question. It was the only thing that made sense. Anna didn't deny it. "Julian, we didn't plan anything. Things just happened." "Spare me that," I said, my voice cracking. "You walked in here with him holding your hand. That didn't just happen." Daniel kept his gaze steady. "We didn't come here to argue. We came to present you with an arrangement that benefits everyone." I barked out a laugh that scraped at my ribs. "Everyone except me." "Not true," he replied calmly. "The settlement is generous. You'll walk away with assets, financial security, and freedom from a marriage that hasn't worked in a long time." I stared at him. "You were my lawyer," I said slowly. "You handled my father's estate. You knew exactly what I inherited." Daniel's expression didn't change, but Anna's eyes flickered just slightly, confirming what I had already suspected. She knew too. They knew before the crash. They knew where I was going that day. They knew I was coming home with news that would change everything. And suddenly the memory of the headlights in my rearview mirror didn't feel like a coincidence. "Julian," Anna said, in a tone that sounded almost annoyed, "don't make this into something it isn't." "Then tell me what it is," I said. "Because from where I'm lying, it looks an awful lot like the two of you were waiting for my inheritance to finalize before you threw me away like garbage." She flinched at the word garbage, but didn't correct me. Instead, she took a breath. "You haven't been yourself for a long time," she said, as if she were delivering a diagnosis. "The stress, the family issues, your mood swings, it hasn't been easy living with you. You've changed." I changed. I stared at her. "I got hit by a truck. Before that," she snapped, "you've been distant, distracted, unfocused. This isn't just about money." But her eyes betrayed her. It was entirely about money. Daniel stepped forward slightly. "The faster we finalize things, the better it is for everyone. There's no need to involve additional lawyers or escalate the situation." "Of course there's no need," I said quietly. "Because you thought you had this locked up. You thought I'd sign anything from this hospital bed just to get you both out of my life." Anna's jaw clenched. Daniel's expression tightened in a way only a trained liar would notice. Something was slipping for them, and they knew it. I studied Daniel's face, the same face I had trusted less than a week ago. The same man who congratulated me on the inheritance. The same man who insisted on handling all the paperwork personally. The same man I had told, stupidly, exactly where I was going after leaving his office that final day. "There was another car," I said slowly, "right before the crash. Behind me, tailgating me." Daniel didn't blink. "Accidents happen, Julian. Especially on wet roads." I kept my eyes on his. "You said you wanted to finish what we started. What does that mean exactly?" Anna turned sharply toward him. "What does that mean?" she repeated, this time with actual confusion in her voice. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. He just stared at me with a quiet, controlled expression that told me I had gotten too close to a line he didn't want crossed. Anna stepped back. "Daniel," she said again, her voice rising slightly. "What's he talking about?" Daniel exhaled slowly, like a man losing patience. "Julian is in a fragile mental state. Concussion, stress. Let's not feed into delusions." "Delusions don't slam into your car at 60 miles an hour," I said. "Someone hit me. And now the two of you show up together with divorce documents and a timeline that doesn't add up. Forgive me for asking questions." Anna looked between us, her posture straightening. "Daniel, did you know about the accident?" "Of course not," he said immediately, but too quickly. Anna noticed. For the first time since she walked into my room, she seemed unsure. She stepped away from him, just an inch, but enough for me to see it. A crack, a fracture in their perfect united front. Daniel must have seen it too, because his voice turned sharper. "We're wasting time. Sign the agreement, Julian. You'll be discharged soon and we can finish this properly." I stared at the folder he had placed beside my bed. He actually expected me to sign something in front of him, while half-conscious, with broken ribs, under pressure. The arrogance was unbelievable. "No," I said simply. Anna's mouth tightened. "Julian, don't be dramatic." "No," I repeated louder. Not today. Not ever. Not without my own lawyer. Daniel let out a cold, humorless laugh. Julian, you don't need another lawyer. You need a calm mind. And you need distance from my money, I said. Anna's face flushed with anger. This is exactly what I meant about your paranoia. Enough, Daniel snapped, turning to her. It was the first time he had let emotion slip in front of me. She blinked, startled. We'll come back, he said stiffly. Give him time to think. He reached for her shoulder to guide her toward the door. She hesitated, another crack, but then let him steer her out of the room. They stepped into the hallway, and for a moment Daniel looked back at me. His expression was no longer polite or professional. It was something darker, something final. Then the door closed, and I was alone with the sound of my heart pounding through the monitor. I didn't know what was coming next. But one thing was certain now. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just an affair. Someone wanted me gone. And my $33 million inheritance was the reason. The door had barely clicked shut when the room felt heavier, as if the air itself was trying to warn me not to relax. I kept staring at the place where Daniel and Anna had stood, replaying every second of their visit. The polished suit, the rehearsed lines, the sudden flicker of fear in Anna's eyes when I mentioned the accident. None of it fit the story they wanted me to believe. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. I tried to shift in the bed, but the pain in my ribs flared like someone driving a hot nail into my side. The machine beside me beeped faster. I steadied my breathing the way the nurse had instructed. Slow, careful, shallow. The medication made my thoughts sluggish, but the suspicion in my gut was sharp and clear. If Daniel had anything to do with the crash, and if Anna knew, then staying here, alone, groggy, hooked up to machines, was exactly what they needed. Vulnerable, isolated, convenient. A perfect sitting target if someone wanted to finish the job. I glanced toward the door, half expecting it to open again. It didn't. But I wasn't alone for long. Nurse Miller entered, wheeling a small cart of syringes and medication. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, her hair pulled into a tight bun. I'd seen her several times since waking up. She was one of the few people in the building who seemed genuinely concerned. You look pale, Julian, she said softly, adjusting the four. Your heart rate spiked. Everything okay? I opened my mouth, then hesitated. Could I trust her? Could I trust anyone? She noticed my silence and paused. Julian, she said, lowering her voice. Was that your wife who just left? Yes, I said. And someone else. The man in the suit? She asked. I nodded. She pressed her lips into a tight, uneasy line. I don't like him, she said bluntly. The way he talks to staff. The way he walks in like he owns the place. The way he insisted on checking your chart when he was here the first day. I froze. What? She sighed. He said he was your attorney and had authorization to review your case file. I told him he'd need you to confirm that. He stepped out into the hallway to call you. So he claimed, and came back saying you approved it. My heartbeat kicked up. Why wasn't I told? Because the system registered your approval, she said. From your phone. My blood turned cold. My phone had been destroyed during the crash. Someone had used my number. Someone who knew I couldn't answer. Nurse Miller adjusted my blanket, unaware of the panic rising in me. Anyway, she continued. He looked over every page, every medication order. He asked a lot of questions about your condition. Specifically how sedated you were expected to be. I stared at her. Hard. He asked about sedation? Yes, she said, frowning. He seemed very concerned that you might be in too much pain to make decisions. I swallowed. Or too sedated to realize you were being killed. She straightened one of the monitors and lowered her voice again. Julian, something else happened earlier. I wasn't sure if I should tell you. Tell me, I said immediately. Before your wife arrived, someone tried to access your room. Who? A man, wearing a badge. Said he was with hospital maintenance. But he wasn't on the log, and he couldn't answer basic questions. When I insisted he step aside and radioed security, he disappeared down the stairwell. My skin prickled. Daniel, or someone Daniel sent. Making sure I was still alive. Or confirming whether I needed another accident. You should rest, Nurse Miller said, patting my arm. I'll be back with food shortly. Try to stay calm. She left, leaving me with a head full of increasingly dark possibilities. The ceiling tiles blurred above me as my mind raced. A lawyer with access to my financial records. A wife who suddenly found someone else right after I inherited millions. A crash that felt too deliberate. A mysterious man trying to enter my room. sedation questions, unauthorized chart access. None of it was coincidence. And if Daniel had already planned to take my money and replace me, then why bother with divorce paperwork? Why talk about a settlement at all? Unless the crash was supposed to finish me. Unless the generous settlement was just a fallback plan because I'd survived. Unless they were improvising. The door clicked again, and my heart jumped, only to settle when I saw it wasn't Daniel. It was a young male nurse I hadn't met before. He rolled in another tray, didn't smile, didn't introduce himself, didn't meet my eyes. He simply set the tray down, checked something on the floor pump, and walked out without a word. Strange. Too strange. I narrowed my eyes at the 4 bag now hanging on the pole. The liquid inside seemed slightly cloudier than before. Or was it the meds making me foggy? I pressed the nurse call button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. Still nothing. My throat tightened. The room felt suddenly smaller, darker. I reached for the controls to raise the bed, but the panel wasn't responding. Someone had disabled it. I grabbed the 4 pump to slide it closer. Maybe there was a manual cancel button, but when I shifted, sharp electric pain shot through my ribs and arm. I hissed and let go, breathing hard. My vision blurred around the edges. The cloudiness in the 4. The malfunctioning nurse call. The silent nurse. Something is happening. My hands shook as I reached for the 4 line taped to my arm. But before I could rip it out, my phone vibrated. My broken phone. The one the paramedics said was beyond repair. The screen flickered, half dead, but a name glowed through the cracks. Daniel Lawson. A call. He was calling me. In the hospital. Right after leaving. My heart hammered as I stared at the screen, frozen. If I answered, he'd know I was awake enough to talk. Awake enough to fight. If I didn't, he might assume something had worked. The phone buzzed again. Louder. Longer. My chest tightened with realization. Terrifying, unmistakable. This wasn't an ordinary call. This was a check. He was checking if I was still alive. And I had no idea how long I had before he stopped checking and started acting. The phone vibrated again, rattling against the metal bedside rail like a warning bell. Daniel's name glowed through the cracked screen, a fractured, ghostly reminder of the man who had just stood beside my wife acting like he was delivering a sermon instead of a death sentence. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I let it ring until the vibration stopped. The silence that followed was worse, because now he knew I hadn't answered. Maybe he would assume I was sleeping. Maybe he would assume I was sedated. Or maybe he would assume the new medication had taken effect. The one the silent nurse hooked directly into my 4. My pulse hammered against the inside of my skull. I forced myself to sit up just enough to look at the 4 bag again. The fluid wasn't just cloudier. It had tiny white streaks swirling inside, dissolving slowly. I didn't recognize it. And I'd worked around medical environments enough to know that anything you don't recognize in a hospital is bad news. My vision wavered for a moment. The fluorescent lights flickered, or maybe my eyes did. I grabbed the 4 line, and with one sharp tug tore the needle out of my arm. Pain flared, hot and bright, and blood pooled instantly at the surface, dripping down my wrist. The monitors reacted, beeping in disapproval. Good. Noise meant attention. Noise meant witnesses. I slapped a wad of tissue from the tray onto the wound and held pressure. The dizziness faded slightly, enough for my brain to clear. Enough to realize that if someone had been trying to kill me quietly, I had just made their job a lot noisier. I swung my legs off the bed. Bad idea. A lightning bolt shot from my ribs through my spine. My vision pulsed black for a second. I clutched the metal rail and steadied myself. The hospital gown brushed cold against my legs as I planted my feet on the floor. I couldn't run. I could barely stand. But staying in the bed was suicide. A voice echoed faintly down the hallway. A man's voice. Calm. Professional. Too familiar. Daniel. He had come back. Room 312, he was saying pleasantly. Yes, I just saw him earlier. Just checking on something I forgot to sign. The nurse replied something too soft to hear. My stomach dropped. I had minutes. Maybe less. I pulled the rolling 4 pole in front of the door, pathetic as a barricade, but the only thing I could move without collapsing. I needed help. I needed Nurse Miller. I needed anyone who wasn't on Daniel's payroll. My fingers trembled as I reached for the landline phone the hospital kept under the TV. But when I lifted the receiver, there was no dial tone. Dead. Completely dead. Cut. My breathing thinned. Someone had disabled the call button. Someone had tampered with my bed controls. Someone had introduced something foreign into my 4. And someone had killed the phone. A perfect setup for a silent medical incident. A heart attack. A complication. A reaction to treatment. Something no one would question too hard when the grieving wife and her devoted lawyer explained themselves. Footsteps approached. Slow. Confident. Daniel's walk. I could tell by the rhythm. I moved to the bathroom, gripping the wall, each breath a needle stabbing my ribs from the inside. I flipped the lock. A flimsy one, but at least it would slow him a few seconds. Maybe. In the tiny mirror over the sink, I hardly recognized myself. Blood on my arm, eyes glassy from pain, and whatever had already entered my system, hair plastered to my forehead. I looked like someone already half dead, which, I realized, might actually help me. The door handle rattled. Gently at first. Too gently. Julian. Daniel's voice floated through the wood, warm, polite, completely wrong for the situation. Nurse Miller said your heart rate spiked. I just wanted to check on you. Liar. Every syllable was a lie wrapped in professional courtesy. I pressed my back against the cool tile wall, breathing through my teeth. The handle turned again. Harder this time. Julian, are you all right? The staff is concerned. Another lie. He was concerned. Concerned that I had survived longer than planned. Silence stretched. Then a soft tapping, like knuckles brushing the door. If you don't answer, I'll need to come in. We can't risk you injuring yourself again. Again. The word echoed inside me. Injuring yourself. Injuring. As if he was already rehearsing the explanation for my fall or self-inflicted incident that had tragically ended everything. My legs trembled. My ribs throbbed. My vision doubled for a moment. I closed my eyes. I couldn't fight him. I couldn't outrun him. But maybe I didn't need to. Maybe all I needed was one witness. One person who saw him force his way in. One person who heard my voice before anything happened. I opened my eyes and looked at the slim bathroom window. Just big enough to shout through. Just small enough that he couldn't fit through. I gripped the windowsill and pushed it up with all the strength left in my cracked bones. Cold air rushed in. Night air. Sounds of traffic below. Life. People. Witnesses. I leaned toward the window and shouted with everything left in me. Help. I need. The door to the bathroom shook violently as Daniel threw his shoulder into it. Once. Twice. Julian. He snapped now, dropping the polite tone entirely. Open the door. I shouted again, louder, rawer. Help. Someone. The door splintered. Daniel crashed into the room, his breath heavy, his eyes sharp and focused. An entirely different man than the smooth lawyer from earlier. The window was behind me. He was in front of me. Too close. Too fast. I had seconds. Maybe less. But I had one advantage left. He didn't think I knew. He didn't think I could fight. He didn't think I was capable of anything but dying quietly. He was about to learn otherwise. Daniel filled the doorway like a closing fate, his expression no longer polished or professional. His suit jacket was wrinkled from slamming into the door, his breath short, controlled, but edged with the kind of panic only predators feel when the prey suddenly refuses to lie still. We stared at each other for a long, taut second. He looked at the open window behind me, then back at my face. His voice dropped to a low, irritated growl. Julian, what exactly do you think you're doing? My chest burned from shouting. My ribs throbbed in angry pulses. But the fear was different now. Not paralyzing. Sharpening. Calling for help. I said quietly. The thing innocent people do when someone is trying to kill them. His jaw twitched. It was the only crack in his mask. Words like that, he murmured, stepping closer, are very dangerous when said to the wrong person. I slid sideways, just enough that the cold metal towel bar was behind my hand. I wasn't strong, but I didn't need to be strong. I just needed to stay alive for another minute. Maybe two. You shouldn't be here, I said. Lawyers don't handle medical matters. They don't show up unannounced. They don't supervise for changes. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, a smile that had probably persuaded hundreds of judges, clients, and opposing counsel. You're struggling, Julian. Trauma does that. It twists memories. It creates monsters where none exist. He took another step. He was blocking the only exit. No one injected anything into your fore, he continued calmly. You pulled it out yourself, and you're bleeding. You're not stable. You need to lie down before you collapse. I laughed gently. The first time I'd laughed since the accident. It wasn't humor. It was realization. That's the line you rehearsed, isn't it? If I die, you say I was confused. If I don't die, you say I'm unstable. His eyes flickered. That was confirmation enough. He took another step toward me, closing the distance to just a few feet. Julian, he said, voice softening. You weren't supposed to wake up yet. You weren't supposed to make this messy. But we can still fix it. We can still end this with dignity. For everyone. My fingers tightened around the towel bar behind me. Cold metal, smooth, solid. I was sweating, dizzy, injured, but I was awake. And for the first time since the crash, fully aware of the danger. Does Anna know? I asked. His expression didn't change. But his silence was the answer. Was she part of it? I pressed. Or did she just get seduced into it halfway through? A flicker of offense crossed his face, like my words were beneath him, not untrue but unacceptable. Your wife, he said with a hint of condescension, is a very emotional woman. She reacts. She doesn't plan. She simply aligned herself with someone who can secure her future. Someone who isn't drowning in medical debt and unresolved issues. So she had switched sides. Not out of malice. Out of opportunity. That hurt more than the ribs. And the car accident. I asked, was that you or her idea? He stepped so close I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the tiny stress lines around his eyes. You asked too many questions for a man who shouldn't be able to stand. Hired driver. I pushed. Remote cut brakes? Or just a simple impact on a rural road? His voice dropped to a whisper. Does it matter? My vision shuddered for a moment. Just one heartbeat of dizziness, but I didn't let him see it. It matters, I said, because it tells me how desperate you are. He tilted his head slightly. And what does that tell you? That you can't kill me without creating a bigger mess than you're ready to handle. The smile vanished from his face. He moved quickly then. Not a lunge. Not a strike. Just a sudden shift of weight. A tightening of posture. The body language of a man stepping into a kill box. I swung the towel bar. Not at his head. I knew I wouldn't land that. I smashed it against the metal soap dispenser on the wall. The crash echoed like a gunshot. A loud, piercing metallic bang that vibrated through the small bathroom and spilled into the hallway. That was the point. Hospitals react to noise, to chaos, to anything that sounds like a patient collapsing or equipment breaking. Footsteps approached immediately. Voices rose from the corridor. Daniel's eyes widened. Not in fear. He was too controlled for that, but in recognition that his timeline had just been shattered. He reached for me, but I shoved myself toward the window just enough to force him to follow instead of block. He grabbed my arm. His grip was iron. Stop, he hissed. You're making this worse for yourself. Good, I said. Worse is loud. A sharp knock hit the bathroom door. Mr. Christopher? Is everything all right in there? Daniel's grip tightened. His jaw clenched. He had seconds to decide whether to risk being seen with his hands on a patient, in a locked bathroom, with a disconnected and broken equipment. For a man who lived off plausible deniability, this was the worst possible tableau. Let go, I said quietly. Footsteps multiplied in the hallway. Another knock. Louder. Sir, we're coming in. Daniel's breath pulsed once through his nose. A furious exhale, but he released my arm. He stepped back, adjusted his tie, smoothed his hair, instantly returning to the polished attorney. By the time the door swung open, he wasn't touching me at all. He wasn't even looking at me. He turned toward the nurses like he had been interrupted mid-consultation. I heard something fall, Daniel said smoothly. The patient is disoriented. I was trying to ensure he didn't injure himself further. The nurses looked at the blood on my arm, at the broken dispenser, at the 4 on the floor, at the open window, and then at Daniel. Suspicion flickered. Just enough. He sensed it too. I'll let you handle the medical matters, he said, stepping past them. I'll return later to finish the paperwork. He left without looking at me, but he paused just long enough in the doorway to murmur, low enough only I could hear. You bought yourself time, Julian. Nothing more. He walked down the hall in perfect calm, but I saw something in his posture I hadn't seen before. Annoyance, frustration, and beneath it, fear that I was no longer predictable. That meant the game had changed, but it also meant he would come back smarter, quieter, deadlier. I needed allies. Real ones. Because Daniel and Anna hadn't tried to kill me once. They were not finished, and I was running out of time. The nurses escorted Daniel out of the room, their eyes narrowing at his retreating figure, but not narrow enough. Men like Daniel knew how to slide through suspicion like oil through water. His footsteps faded down the corridor, each one confident, measured, and lethal in its certainty. When the hallway fell silent, I finally exhaled. It hurt, deep and sharp along my ribs, but it felt like the first real breath I'd taken since waking up. The nurses fluttered around me, reconnecting the 4, checking vitals, scolding me gently for overexerting myself. I kept my eyes on the door. Daniel would come back. He hadn't said it outright, but predators don't need to. They communicate through sidelong glances, half smiles, and unfinished sentences. The window was closed again. The lock clicked into place. I wasn't sure if the nurse did it or Daniel had before being interrupted. Either way, it felt symbolic. A cage latching shut. "You want something for the pain?" one nurse asked. I shook my head. I needed a clear mind. Pain was better than fog. Pain meant I was still alive. When they left, closing the door behind them, I finally allowed myself to look at my phone, the replacement they'd given me, a cheap hospital-issued temporary device. No contacts, no photos, no messages. But I remembered one number by heart. My father's number. Or rather, the number that went to the estate attorney who had handled everything. Daniel's partner. His colleague. Or maybe his accomplice. I dialed anyway. It rang twice before a smooth, familiar voice answered. "This is Attorney Samuel Price. How may I assist?" Price. Daniel's mentor. His senior partner. His supposed moral anchor. A man my father had trusted. A man who had overseen the transfer of the inheritance before Daniel took over the final paperwork. I took a careful breath. "Mr. Price, this is Julian Christopher." There was a pause, not long, but not instant either. "Julian," he repeated, his voice warm, practiced. "Good Lord, we've all been so worried. How are you feeling? The news of your accident was, who told you I was in an accident?" Silence. Soft. A little too soft. "Your wife," he said smoothly, "called our office the night it happened." My grip tightened around the phone. "Funny," I said. "She didn't call the hospital." Another silence. Slight. Controlled. "Mr. Price," I said slowly, "I need to know something, and I need the truth. The full truth." "Of course. Who else knew about the inheritance before I signed the final documents?" Price inhaled sharply. "Julian, why would that matter? Just answer." He hesitated again. "Well, your wife was informed of the basic estate transfer as next of kin." My blood ran cold. "She knew before the signing?" "As a standard," he said, "spouses are notified in cases involving marital estates." Daniel handled the briefing. Daniel. He had told her. He had told her everything. Hours before the crash. "And my father's conditions?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. "The clause about needing my signature before any funds could transfer?" "Yes," Price said. "Which is why Daniel rushed to meet you that day. He told us he wanted to finalize things before the weekend." Finalize. Settle. Secure. Eliminate obstacles. "Julian," Price continued, his tone shifting, "has something happened?" Daniel had many masks. Price sounded like he only had one, but I wasn't sure anymore. I chose my next words carefully. "Daniel was here," I said. "In the hospital. Just now. He came into my room without permission. He had my four in his hand." A heavy pause. "That's concerning," Price said. "Concerning," I repeated. "He's not a doctor." "No," Price agreed. "But he is a man who takes responsibilities very seriously. Perhaps he was checking on your state. He injected something into my line." The pause this time wasn't soft. It was sharp, jagged. "Julian," Price said slowly, "listen to me. Daniel is ambitious. Yes. He's assertive. Yes. But he's not reckless. He wouldn't. He already tried." I cut in. "And now he thinks he's running out of time." Price's voice changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough. Enough that I knew he had finally understood the magnitude of what I was saying. "Where are you right now?" he asked quietly. "Room 510. Mercy Hill Hospital." Paper rustled. A keyboard clicked. His breath sharpened. "Julian, I'm seeing something here. Something I didn't expect." "What?" "There's a premature transfer request logged in the system. Filed under your name. Signed electronically. When? 2 days ago. The document claims you gave power of attorney to Daniel Larson." My fingertips went numb. Daniel had moved faster than I thought. He hadn't been waiting. He had already prepared the paperwork. "Julian," Price continued, his tone now tight, urgent, "this request is illegal. It will be denied. But the attempt," his words trailed. "The attempt tells us everything." "So what now?" I asked. "Do I leave? Run? Hide?" "No," Price said sharply. "Don't move. Don't run. If Daniel is acting alone, he isn't," I snapped. "He's with my wife." Price exhaled a long, exhausted breath. "This is worse than I thought. Much worse. I'm calling the hospital administrator. They will put your room on lockdown, and security will be stationed outside your door." He's already fooled them once. Not this time, Price said firmly. I'll make sure of it. But there was something else in his voice. Something tight. Something strained. Something that told me he wasn't shocked. He was confirming a suspicion he had been afraid to voice. And that shook me more than anything Daniel had done. Because if Price suspected Daniel, why had he kept him close? Why hadn't he stopped him? Unless he thought he could control him, or profit from him, or needed him. Julian, Price said, returning to that calm, authoritative tone lawyers use when the truth is too dangerous to say outright. There is something you should know about your father's estate. Something I've been trying to reach you about for days. What? I whispered. The $33 million wasn't supposed to go entirely to you alone. There is a second beneficiary. My pulse thundered. Who? I can't disclose that over the phone, Price said. But I can tell you this. The existence of this second beneficiary is the real reason you're in danger. My stomach tightened, a deep knot forming beneath the bruises. Daniel didn't want just the money. He wanted control. And maybe Anna wasn't just seduced by opportunity. Maybe she was tied to something much bigger, much older, much darker. I'm coming to the hospital, Price said. Personally. Is that safe? I asked. No, he admitted. But it's necessary. As he hung up, a cold realization sank into my bones. Someone other than me was supposed to inherit. Someone Daniel knew about. Someone he intended to remove, permanently. And I had just made myself the first obstacle. I lay back in the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of hospital equipment. Then I heard footsteps. Quiet. Controlled. Not hurrying. Not rushing. Familiar. Daniel wasn't finished with me. And the night wasn't even close to over. Night fell without warning. One moment the hallway outside my room glowed with that sterile, bluish hospital light, and the next it dimmed into something quieter, something that made every sound sharper. Footsteps. The shuffle of paper. A soft hum of wheels as someone pushed a cart down the hall. I couldn't tell which sounds were harmless and which belonged to him. Price hadn't arrived yet. Security still hadn't shown up. For a man who'd promised urgency, he was taking his time, or being delayed, or intercepted. I kept checking the doorway, expecting Daniel to appear again with that pleasant, empty expression and a syringe he'd insist was standard protocol. My heart thudded steadily, but too fast. I hated how trapped I felt, lying there like bait. Maybe that's exactly what I was. Then, a soft knock. Gentle, polite, but too faint to be a nurse. Nurses knock like people who expect you to answer. This knock was from someone who already knew you wouldn't. My chest tightened. Julian? A voice whispered. It's me. Anna. My wife. I couldn't answer. Not at first. My throat closed around her name. When she slipped into the room, she didn't turn on the lights. She closed the door behind her slowly, as if sealing us in. Her silhouette hovered at the foot of my bed, and although the dim light hit her face, I felt the cold distance radiating off her. She wasn't wearing the expensive suit today. She wasn't even dressed for work. Jeans, a sweater, hair pulled back casually. Like she was visiting a friend in the hospital. Like she wasn't the woman who abandoned me, then showed up days later with divorce papers and a new man. Julian, she whispered again. We need to talk. Before he gets here. He. She meant Daniel. Not my lawyer. Her lover. I swallowed. Why are you here now? She hesitated, then stepped closer, and in the dim blue glow coming from the hallway, I saw her eyes. Not cold like before. Not triumphant. Afraid. I didn't know, she said. Not at first. I didn't know what he was planning. A bitter laugh almost escaped my throat. You didn't know my lawyer was sleeping with you? Or you didn't know he wanted me dead? She flinched. Julian, please. Listen. You're not safe. Daniel. He said Price can't stop the transfer once the second beneficiary signs. He's coming tonight. Both of them are. Second beneficiary. The words hit my chest like a fist. I leaned forward despite the pain. Who is it, Anna? You know. She looked at the floor. Julian, your father. He didn't tell you everything. I felt the room tilt slightly. Not from the accident, not from my injuries, but from the truth finally teasing its way to the surface. Tell me, I whispered. Anna opened her mouth to speak, but a shadow moved in the hallway. A tall figure. Pausing. Listening. Anna's eyes widened in terror. He's here, she breathed. And before I could call for help, before I could even reach the call button, the door handle turned slowly, silently, deliberately. Daniel wasn't finished with me, and neither was the truth Anna had come to reveal. The door opened so slowly it barely made a sound, but the air in the room seemed to compress under its movement. Anna froze. I could barely breathe. The shadow in the doorway elongated across the floor until it reached the foot of my bed like a dark stain creeping forward. And then he stepped inside. Daniel Price. Perfectly groomed. Tailored charcoal suit. Calm, relaxed posture. The kind of man who always looked like he was winning, even when he'd just been caught. He closed the door gently behind him and let his eyes travel across the room. First to me, then to Anna. His smile barely moved, but the contempt behind it sharpened like a blade. Anna, he said quietly, you weren't supposed to be here. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. She stepped back instinctively. Daniel, I came to warn him. You can't do this. He ignored her and walked to the chair beside my bed as if he were making a routine check-in. He pulled the chair out, sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and rested his hands neatly on his knee. You know, he said, looking at me in a way that made my ribs ache. I was hoping this wouldn't be messy. I really was. But you're persistent. I'll give you that. I kept my eyes on him. Anna thinks you're dangerous. She's right. He tilted his head, amused. Dangerous is a matter of perspective, Julian. I prefer ambitious. Anna moved closer to the wall, as if trying to disappear. Daniel, please. He wasn't supposed to survive the first time. You told me. She stopped herself with a gasp, realizing too late what she'd said out loud. My pulse thudded like a hammer inside my skull. The first time, Daniel didn't even bother hiding his smirk. Well, he said, shrugging, accidents happen. You tried to kill me, I said quietly. You and Anna. Anna shook her head violently. No, Julian, I didn't know about the truck. I didn't know until after it happened. I only knew he wanted you out of the picture. I swear I didn't know he was going to run me off the road. I finished. She pressed her shaking hands to her face. Daniel sighed, as if the conversation bored him. Julian, let's be adults. You inherited a massive sum, an amount that most people will never see in their lifetimes. $33 million is enough to tempt anyone. You can't expect your marriage to survive that kind of pressure. My jaw clenched. Funny. I thought marriages were supposed to survive everything. He gave a small laugh. Not marriages like yours. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Your father trusted you with something valuable. But he didn't tell you everything, did he? My stomach tightened. Anna's eyes darted to the floor. Daniel went on, savoring every word. You're not the only beneficiary, Julian. Your father set up a secondary clause. Someone else gets half the money if you fail to fulfill certain conditions. I stared at him. What conditions? He raised a brow. Survival. Anna swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. Julian, the second beneficiary, it's someone you know. Who? The silence in the room expanded, heavy and suffocating. And then the truth dropped like a bomb. Your wife, Daniel said simply. My breath vanished. Anna closed her eyes, tears pooling at her lashes. She didn't deny it. She didn't blink. My father, my own father, had put her in the will. Daniel continued, his tone clinical. Your father believed in protecting the family. He assumed your marriage would last. So he wrote her in. 50% to you. 50% to Anna, if you were no longer competent. He paused. Or alive. The realization hit me like another collision. Anna wasn't just cheating. Anna wasn't just leaving. She had inherited a motive the moment my father died. Daniel leaned back, satisfied. Your wife would gain $16.5 million the moment you die. And when I saw the paperwork, he gestured casually toward Anna. Well, let's say our partnership became mutually beneficial. Anna finally found her voice. Julian, I didn't want any of this. He told me. He promised me. Promised you what? I snapped. She wiped her face. That you wouldn't feel anything. That it would be fast. My fists clenched under the blanket. Daniel stood slowly, smoothing his suit jacket. This didn't have to be ugly. But you kept waking up. Kept asking questions. Kept being inconvenient. He moved toward the 4-line beside my bed and studied it with interest. We're going to fix that tonight, he said. No trucks. No accidents. Just a quiet medical complication. Anna shook her head violently. Daniel, no, I can't. You don't get a vote, he said without looking at her. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small glass vial. Clear. Unlabeled. It glimmered under the fluorescent light. Stop. My voice was calm, too calm. He paused, barely. You think anyone's coming for you? He asked. Price hasn't even been called. And even if he had, he wouldn't get here before I'm finished. He flicked the vial between his fingers. This is quick, painless, clean. Anna made a small choking sound and backed into the wall. Daniel, please, I'm not doing this. I didn't sign up for murder. Daniel finally turned to her, his smile thin. Then lucky for you, you won't have to. That's when the sound came. Not from the hallway, from the window. A low, humming vibration. A dark shape moved past the glass, fast, followed by the faint metallic click of something being placed against the window frame. Daniel frowned. What the? The window shattered inward. A controlled breach. Glass fell across the floor in sparkling shards. 3 figures in tactical gear dropped into the room like shadows. Black vests. Helmets. No insignia. One held a compact battering ram. One held a stun device. One held a weapon with a laser pinpoint trained on Daniel's chest. Step away from the patient, the lead figure commanded. Daniel went pale for the first time. Who the hell are you? The figure reached up and pulled off his helmet. Price. My real lawyer. His expression was stone. You hired the wrong people to kill him, Daniel. Daniel's hand twitched toward the vial, but the stun device hit him before he could move. The jolt knocked him to the ground in a violent spasm. The vial skittered across the floor and shattered harmlessly. Anna screamed. Price grabbed Daniel by the collar and hauled him upright. Daniel Price, he said, voice cold. You are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. Daniel was still twitching, his eyes burning with hatred. You think this is over? He hissed. You don't know anything. I know enough, Price said. And you're not going anywhere. He nodded toward his team. Secure the wife. Another agent stepped toward Anna, who slid down the wall, sobbing, hands raised in surrender. Price came to my bedside. His voice was low. You're safe now, Julian. But this is only the beginning. Daniel wasn't working alone. I looked at Anna, staring at me with a mixture of terror and something else. Shame? No. Something colder. Resignation. Because she knew exactly who else was involved. And she knew I was about to find out. Price leaned close. There's a second name tied to the will, he whispered. And it's not just your wife. My chest tightened. Who? Price hesitated. Someone who knew about the inheritance before you did. The hallway erupted with footsteps as hospital security rushed toward the room. But none of that mattered. Only the name did. The name Price was about to reveal. The one person in my life who should have protected me, and instead had tried to make sure I never lived to spend a single dollar. Julian, Price said quietly. Your father didn't trust you. He trusted someone else. He glanced toward the door, just as a new shadow appeared there. A familiar silhouette. The second beneficiary, Price said, stepping aside, is standing right behind you. I turned slowly, and when I saw who it was, every thought I'd been holding on is shattered. I turned toward the doorway, expecting another uniform, another officer, another stranger. But the silhouette wasn't a stranger. It was a man I had trusted all my life. My older brother, Julian Christopher, stepped into the room. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't even ashamed. He looked at me the way someone studies a problem they expected to solve long ago. Price's team tensed immediately. Anna went silent. Daniel, still half-conscious on the floor, actually laughed. Of course it was Evan. He was always the responsible one. The one Dad relied on. The one who kept the books, handled the meetings, ran the quiet operations behind the scenes. The one who thought I didn't deserve the inheritance. Price spoke first. Evan, he said sharply, don't take another step. Evan ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on mine. You weren't supposed to survive, he said softly. It was supposed to be quick, clean, painless. You'd get your share, and then Anna would hand the rest over. I only needed time to secure what Dad wanted. I felt the room tilt. What Dad wanted? I whispered. Evan exhaled. Our father trusted me to protect the company. You were never meant to run it. You were meant to retire from it. Quietly. Permanently. So that was it. Jealousy. Legacy. Control. He didn't want my money. He wanted my place. Price stepped between us. Julian Christopher, you're under arrest. But Evan raised his hands calmly. I'm not here to fight, he said. It's over. I know that. He looked at me again. And for a second, for the first time since the accident, I saw something crack in him. Regret. Fear. Or maybe simply the moment he realized he had lost everything. I'm sorry, Julian, he said quietly. It wasn't an apology. It was surrender. Security cuffed him. Anna was escorted out next, crying, begging, suddenly realizing $16 million was worth nothing compared to handcuffs. Daniel didn't get to walk out at all. He was dragged. By dawn, the hospital room was empty except for me and Price. He adjusted the blinds, letting in the first thin streaks of morning light. "You're safe now," he said. "But you should know, surviving this wasn't luck. Someone tipped us off. Someone anonymously reported suspicious activity around your inheritance." He paused. "We're still trying to trace the number." "Who was it?" I asked. Price shook his head. "No idea yet. But someone wants you alive." He picked up the broken 4 bag from the floor, studied it, then tossed it into a sealed evidence pouch. "You should rest," he said. "You've got a company to run, and a fortune that's finally yours." When he left, the room fell silent. The sun climbed over the skyline. For the first time since the accident, I breathed without fear. But I couldn't shake one final thought. Someone out there had saved my life, and I had no idea why. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below, and don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.